Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The Negotiation. Today's episode is part 2 of our conversation with Anne Stevenson-Yang, founder of J Capital and one of the foremost American-born experts on the China business landscape, having lived and worked in China for more than 25 years. Last week was an incredible fast-paced conversation with someone who holds no punches when it comes to being honest about China, and this week was no different. We cover China's unemployment rate, the housing bubble, the state of the brick-and-mortar banking system in China, the current impact of COVID-19, and what Anne misses most about being in China while stuck in America during the pandemic. Enjoy.
In terms of keeping COVID infections low, China has done a superb job. Infection rates are extremely low, and every time anything pops up, they just slap it down. It's had, I think, a huge toll on the economy that we're not seeing because of the ability to send money to the state sector and force infrastructure activity. I would expect that there are probably still, God knows how many, 15-20% of that pool of migrant workers who number about nearly 300 million in China who are still at home seeking something to do.
Home to over 4 billion people, the Asia-Pacific region boasts one of the most powerful consumer markets on the planet. Not only is it home to half the world's under 30 population, but it's also home to more than half the world's internet users. It's a market no globally minded brand should ignore, but entering markets like China is no easy task. Just ask the likes of Microsoft, Google, Uber, and Facebook. Times are changing, and with the right partners, doors are slowly opening as more and more companies find success expanding into the markets of the Middle Kingdom. I myself spent 8 years in China, mostly as a venture capitalist, helping early-stage tech companies enter the Asia-Pacific market successfully. This show is dedicated to uncovering and examining successful China entry and growth strategies by interviewing the people behind those success stories. My name is Todd Embley, and welcome to The Negotiation, brought to you by WPIC Marketing and Technologies. Let's talk about China's unemployment rates. Okay, can we believe what we see, and is what we're able to see enough to form an opinion?
No and no. Why would you even think that? I mean, the IMF did a very droll study once. At least I found it droll, although they put it in very, serious objective language about how China's unemployment rate over a 20-year period had such an incredibly flat mathematical stasis that it compared to, nothing else in nature. And no other, like the German unemployment rate was like 5 times as volatile or something like that. I mean, first of all, the first thing to say about Chinese statistics generally is that they're targets. They're not an analysis of a data pool. They're target-seeking behavior. So you're given this target and then you find this way or that way to meet it. Sometimes you miss a little bit, sometimes you overshoot a little, but that's the nature of the statistics. It's not like somebody gives you actual data and you analyze it. As for unemployment specifically, the thing to remember about that is that the people who manage employment come out of the security system. So it used to be just the Public Security Bureau, actually the Ministry of State Security, that managed that. And then they broke off and they became the Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry. There are a lot of different iterations of the bureaucracy, but fundamentally, it's a security function, not an economic function. So the unemployed that we care about are not just people who are randomly unemployed. It's people who used to be employed, who are legal residents of a certain area and whose number tops out a target number that we have that we consider dangerous socially. So unemployment is considered a risk to social stability, and for that reason we care. But nobody cares about creating jobs. There's nobody who has the portfolio to sit around and create jobs. People have the portfolio to make sure that you don't have unemployed people on the streets. Therefore, what they measure is not the same thing as people who need jobs.
Do you think that China has handled COVID-19 pandemic well? And from all accounts, it looks like they have. And one would think that with internal demand for goods and services and the like, that jobs wouldn't be that hard to come by. So what am I missing?
Well, I don't know why you would come to the second conclusion. I mean, that China excels at campaign-driven activity that has very, very simple and clear targets. So in terms of keeping COVID infections low, China has done a superb job. Infection rates are extremely low, and every time anything pops up, they just slap it down. It's had, I think, a huge toll on the economy that we're not seeing because of the ability to send money to the state sector and force infrastructure activity. I would expect that there are probably still, God knows how many, 15, 20% of that pool of migrant workers who number about nearly 300 million in China, who are still at home seeking something to do. And, you know, I don't know what's going on economically because I can't be there, but surely it's, I don't know why you would think that consumption would somehow suck up the idle capacity. But, you know, clearly there are a lot of service businesses that have gone out of business, a lot of people who have a lot less money than they used to, you know, China. And then on top of it, you have floods and all sorts of natural disasters. It's got to be kind of tough there right now.
I asked that question in almost a paraphrased form of a question that's a similar question you've been asked before.
I mean, what's the answer that you would give? I'm sure you know just as much as I do, if not more.
I don't trust that their economy is anywhere near as strong as I think people are believing it to be. And I think it is incredibly fragile. I think they're doing what they can. I think the Chinese people in general are incredibly stout when it comes to keeping things going. But, you know, I mean, same reason I'm baffled. And I was going to also ask you about the currency exchange rate. You know, I maybe you can help explain the currency exchange rate to me right now, because honestly, it's baffling me. I don't understand how it can be where it's at.
Yeah, you and me both. I mean, I think what saved the Chinese exchange rate recently has been the massive expansion of the U.S. dollar. So, you know, the U.S. has put, $3 trillion new dollars into circulation. So initially this happened in 2017 with this, you know, massive tax cut. And then it happened again with all the COVID relief measures. So when you have that many more dollars, it just is easier for the RMB to maintain its exchange rate. Clearly, it's not going to happen forever because the buildup in RMB assets has for so long outstripped the incoming U.S. dollar assets. So, you know, you just can't have that. But when you have this little tiny hole through which China is peering at the international world of currency and controlling what comes out of it, then it's, you know, you control it better than you do elsewhere. So it'll stay controlled until it's not controlled. But when they lose control, they've got to depreciate to 10 and more to the dollar, because, you know, that's where the real value of the renminbi is.
Okay. I want to talk about something else that I've seen you talk about a little bit, and that's the housing situation in China. Do you believe that China is in a housing bubble? And what leads you to believe what you believe? When do you think the bubble will burst, which alludes to what you believe? And what will the resulting effects be?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you know, when you have apartments in, you know, some crappy neighborhood in Shanghai or Beijing or Shenzhen that are going for 200,000 renminbi a square meter, that would be about, you know, $30,000 US a square meter, or $3,000 a foot. I mean, come on, you know, there's nobody. The real issue is that, how tradable is this property really? It's kind of like when at the height of the Japanese bubble, when everybody was talking about how the land under the royal palace in Tokyo was worth all of California or some damn thing like that. The point is, who's actually going to pay money for it? And the answer is nobody. So at least nobody with hard money. So, you know, you have all of this renminbi circulating, And so the value of renminbi assets just goes up, 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 up. And, one expected it to end a long time ago, and it never ends. And as they keep on pumping more renminbi into the economy, there's no particular reason it shouldn't continue to happen. So it continues to happen. But, is anybody going to go to that kind of distant industrial neighborhood of Shenzhen and pay $3,000 a square foot for an apartment there? No. So, as long as you have renminbi, you can have the inflation. Is it translatable into US dollars? No.
I've seen some pretty incredible developments in China that would house upwards of 20,000 people that are ghost towns, and they're gorgeous.
Sure. I mean, they're always pretty, and Evergrande does a really nice job of this, of making these sort of quasi-Hispanic, villas that cross. Of course, they're always said to be designed for 60,000 people, and they always have like 5,000 people, so they're kind of pleasant, right? If they actually had 60,000 people, it would be a different thing. But the point is, housing bubbles always have some BS reason why it's actually valuable. It's by the coast, or it's really, high quality furnishings, or, Washington, D.C. is developing like mad, whatever it might be. But in the end, when these bubbles burst, you realize that it was all actually bullshit.
Do you think that there's a case to be made for having more money than places to put it?
Well, I mean, it's just the same way, the same issue as issuing too much renminbi. It's not that there's a dearth of investment opportunities in China. It's that you're printing. I believe this year M2 has increased over 10%. I mean, that's a crazy amount, particularly when the economy itself, even the reported numbers have been 3% annualized, and it's probably actually negative. So to print 10% more currency is nuts. But that's what's happening. So that's just the inverse of saying that they're printing a lot of renminbi.
What are your thoughts on the brick and mortar banking system of China? I mean, you're a finance person. I think I have seen and felt that it was mostly broken. The rise of the internet banks was really them just saying, forget trying to catch up. Let's just start a new line and be at the front of it in something new. And just the fact that, and talk about the lack thereof of a credit system. It's not like, if you're born in America, you're popped out with a FICO score. There's no such thing in China. So how do they get around that?
Yeah, I'm sort of I'm a barefoot finance person. I'm sure you're more of a finance person than I am. But, the Chinese banks, they're government institutions. And, my early life in China was spent going to banks to pay your phone bill and your utility bill and your mortgage. You had to physically stand in line at the banks to do all these things. And that's why Alipay and WeChat Pay took off so quickly, and everybody's so like, oh, China's so advanced and every single person uses WePay. Yeah, well, we used credit cards 30 years ago, but nobody talked about it because it wasn't a big deal, because the banks all supported credit cards, whereas credit cards at the Chinese banks were incredibly fragmented until pretty recently. Initially, your credit card was only good for that particular bank in that particular province. So, yeah, the banks, the inefficiency of the banks and the hassle that they impose on people is really what supported the tremendously fast growth of WePay and Alipay. That's a simplistic way of putting it, but that's part of what did it. And the credit system, I mean, the credit system is not. I would disagree that it's hampered by a FICO score. It's not something technical like that. The problem is that the Chinese system has the ability to collect from bureaucratically managed institutions, i.e. state-owned institutions. And the bureaucratic system does not have the ability to collect from private institutions. Ergo, private institutions and individuals are risky, and state-owned enterprises are not risky. So if you're a bank, to issue a loan to an individual is just as much trouble as it is. And, maybe that individual loan is going to be, I don't know, $60,000 or something. And issuing a loan of, $100 million, well, maybe not that much, but let's say $6 million to a state-owned enterprise is exactly as much work, but far less risky and higher yield. So which are you going to do? So what you end up doing is when you get all of these mandates from the regulatory institutions that you have to lend to individuals and to private companies and stuff, you just wholesale your loans through institutions that are willing to make that effort.
How strong is Xi Jinping's grasp on power in China right now? Do you think COVID-19 has helped or hurt his cause?
I think that it was always predictable that as China was no longer able to deliver on rapid growth through massive investment, that it would politically close up and tighten and become repressive or more repressive, because, the paramount goal has been to maintain the party's power. And so if you can't do that with everybody's cooperation, then you're going to do that without its cooperation. So you see that happening in Hong Kong. You've seen it happening ever since Xi took over in 2012. It's been a much more repressive place than it was.
Do you think over the 25 years you've been in China that it has been easier, more enjoyable, less easy, more difficult to live in China as a foreigner?
There are different aspects. I would say that probably the pinnacle, or the time when it was pleasantest to live in China as a foreigner was, I hate to say this because it makes me sound so old, and I am so old, but it makes my thinking sound so old, was like 87 and 88, because that was a period when there was a whole lot of openness to different things, to, dances and poetry and coffee houses and plays and all sorts of things that were being tried out admittedly on a very small basis in very small regions of the top cities, but still you could see it, you could do that stuff. And starting in 89, after 89, then there was a huge crackdown on that stuff, and China became much less culturally interesting. There was another kind of efflorescence, one might say, in the late 1990s. And then I would say from 2008, when China got the Olympics, it just became no fun at all.
Why do you think that happened? I was there. That was my time. I arrived in 2007.
Oh, yeah?
And when I got there, it still felt, I was out in Dalian on the East Coast, and they were under the impression that they should really be nice and treat foreigners really, really well. And I felt that slip away in the time afterwards, in the 8 years after that. Why do you think right around the Olympics, was it something to do with the Olympics, or was it something else that started to just change things?
Oh, well, the Olympics were the time in which the Chinese bureaucracies implemented, massive new security measures in order to, in fact, it became just, surveillance became normal, the deployment of just regular people to engage in surveillance of others. I mean, obviously that had been happening a lot in the 1970s and before, but it had kind of lapsed, and then it was revived in 2008. It's that campaign-driven activity. So, I left Beijing on purpose during the Olympics because it just made me, I thought it was gross. There regular people who lived there were quote unquote discouraged from going outside. People who lived along the route of actually I'm thinking of the earlier Communist Party celebration, where there was a big parade down Chang'an Avenue, and everybody on the route had to close their windows and stay at home, and we had curfews at 4 p.m. every day. But in the Olympics it was like that as well. You couldn't go out. You weren't supposed to go to the Olympic Village unless you were invited. The average person in Beijing was not welcome. And then there were all these things people had to do, you had to paint your house a certain color because it was, the Olympic Committee had decided that was going to be the color for Beijing. The police had arrest quotas. I think it was a money thing, like they were trying to, raise budgets. I'm not exactly sure, but I knew a ton of people who were arrested on fake charges and then basically forced to pay a bunch of money before they could get out. It became a very unpleasant place, I thought.
Are you planning to go back?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I have a ton of in-laws there. I have an office there. I have a lot of friends there, and I really miss the food. I mean, there's plenty about China that I really like, but, can't get there now.
What are the things that you really love and appreciate about China?
Besides food, isn't that everybody's number one?
It's up there for me. I'm a big Dongbei Cai. I don't even know if that's a thing, but I'm like Northeast food. I miss like my discount, my eggs and tomatoes. There's so many things that I miss, but
yeah, that really marks you as a man of no culture. The Dongbei Cai thing. Yeah, that's like I like Dongbei Cai too, but yeah, that's like people of refinement in China like Southern food.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's the food. There's I miss Chinese people always. Like when when you run into Chinese people in America, like you go to Chinatown or a Chinese supermarket, or you're waiting for a plane and there are a bunch of Chinese people, you just feel more relaxed with them. American people, like, they care so much about face, and and they're so touchy, and they're easily set off. Whereas a Chinese person, it's just really easy to say, hey, give me that piece of newspaper. I want to read this article. Or, hey, can you, do you have, hey, can you give me 25 cents? Cause I'm, or 25 cents, that really shows my age. So can you give me $2 cause I want to buy a candy bar? That's the kind of thing you can do with a Chinese person that you can't do so much with American people. And I miss that sort of feeling of on the street, of just being relaxed with other Chinese people.
Are you a Fuyan or Fuyar? South versus north. The Fuyan or Fuyar.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely the Aryan person. I'm like Beijing people split into Hutong people and Yuanzi people. So Yuanzi people are like the official class who lived in the courtyard areas, and the Hutong people, the alley people, are like, Didao,
yeah,
right, all the way from Beijing, local people. I'm your basic alley person.
Anne Stevenson-Yang, thank you so much for coming on the show and putting up with a whole bunch of questions from me that were somewhat all over the map, but it was really great. Thank you for putting up with me and coming on the show. A great pleasure to have you. Purely
a pleasure, Todd. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Growing a company is hard. Doing it in a foreign market? Exponentially so. The best piece of advice I can give you is not to do it alone. When you start looking across the pond for further expansion possibilities, and I sincerely hope that you do, make sure you choose the right partners to do it with. My good friends at WPIC Marketing and Technologies have almost 20 years of experience helping brands just like yours enter China. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Negotiation, and if you're interested in being a guest or want to connect with me or any of our team, please reach out to us at podcast@wpic.co. And be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. 再见.